One of the biggest questions I'm getting right now in South Surrey and White Rock is this.
Can I build a garden suite just like this one right here on my property? And the honest answer is maybe, but it's probably not in the way that you think.
You see, the province of British Columbia recently passed Bill 44, which introduced what's called the small-scale multi-unit housing. In simple terms, it removed exclusive single-family zoning across most urban residential areas in the province. Yes, this applies to areas like Surrey and White Rock, and it also applies in most municipalities across British Columbia. But here's the part that most people miss.
What's allowed on paper and what's actually feasible on your specific lot are two very different things. In this video, I'm going to break down what Bill 44 really changed, how Surrey and White Rock interpret it, how transit proximity affects unit counts, and why so many garden suite plans quietly fall apart once we look at things like setbacks, servicing, and real-world costs.
Because building a garden suite isn't just about permission, it's about feasibility. And by the end of this video, you'll know whether this is a smart long-term move for your property or an expensive misunderstanding waiting to happen. That all sounds good? Let's get into it right now. You only get one chance to buy or sell your next home. Let's get it right. Hey, worth mentioning, my name is Darren, a real estate professional based right here in the White Rock and South Surrey area. And I've been helping families just like yours buy and sell homes here all the way back to 2007. Over the years, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people, many of whom have found me right here on this very YouTube channel. So if you're thinking about making a move and want some smart local advice with zero pressure, just real insight, there's a link in the description of this video to book a time with me or my team. And together we'll help you make sure that you make the right move with confidence.
Now, not that long ago, most urban residential lots in BC were strictly zoned for one single family home. Municipalities controlled density almost entirely, but Bill 44 changed that.
It removed exclusive single-family zoning and required municipalities to allow small-scale multi-unit housing on what used to be single-family lots. Depending on lot size and proximity to frequent transit, properties must now allow a minimum of 3 to 6 units. And that's where things start getting misunderstood. People hear 3 to 6 units and assume they meant they could automatically add a garden suite, stack rental units on top of each other, or dramatically increase density without any constraints. But that's not how it works. The legislation sets minimum unit allowances. It does not remove physical constraints, servicing limitations, covenants, setbacks, or site realities. And it absolutely does not mean every lot suddenly becomes a development site. This applies across most municipalities in BC, including Surrey and White Rock. But how it plays out depends entirely on the specific address. So let's talk about what your options actually are. If you're looking at a property in South Surrey, White Rock, or anywhere in BC under these new rules, you generally have a few possible paths. Option 1, keep the existing house and add a legal secondary suite.
Option 2, which is what most people are curious about, is keep the main house and add a garden suite in the backyard. And in some cases, you might have both a legal suite in the house and a garden suite if the lot layout and servicing support it.
That's still low density housing. The main home stays and you're adding flexibility, rental income, space for family, aging parents, long-term hold strategy, whatever. Doesn't matter. It's all awesome option. Now, option 3 moves into redevelopment, replacing an existing home with a duplex, sometimes incorporating suites within that structure. And option 4 would be removing the existing home and building a purpose-built multiplex, anywhere from 3 to 6 units if the property qualifies. Completely different scale, different cost structure, different timeline, different financing considerations, different risk profile. But there isn't a universal best option. There's only the option that aligns with your lot, your budget, your timeline, and what you're actually trying to accomplish. And that's why seeing something online that says SSMUH eligible or RS zoning is not enough. Hear me when I say this. The evaluation has to be done per address. So what actually determines whether you can build a garden suite? This is where assumptions fall apart. First, you need zoning. You need to know your specific zoning, the specific zoning of the property you're looking at buying, not just the city, the actual zoning designation tied to the address. White Rock, for example, has multiple residential zones, RS1, RS2, RS3, and others, each with different setbacks and site coverage rules. Surrey has its own zoning categories as well. Bill 44 layered minimum density permissions over existing zoning, but it didn't erase zoning altogether. Your lot still has rules attached to it. If you're in White Rock, for an example, you can use the city's online zoning viewer. Surrey also has one called Cosmos, which stands for City of Surrey Online Mapping System. You're going to want to start there, but that's only step one because feasibility depends on the address, not just the city. Now, let's talk about lot size and transit proximity and clear some things up here. Under the small scale multi-unit housing rules, municipalities must allow a minimum of 3 units on parcels of land 280 square meters or smaller, minimum of 4 units on parcels greater than 280 square meters, and up to 6 units if the parcel is larger than 280 square meters and within 400 meters of a provincially prescribed frequent bus stop. A few clarifications here as well. Lane access to the home or the lot is not required. Frontage alone does not trigger 6 units, and the 6-unit threshold is tied specifically to proximity to frequent bus service, not to being in a transit-orientated area. That's another common confusion. Transit-orientated areas, or TOAs, are completely different. Those are provincial designations around SkyTrain stations or major bus exchanges. Surrey currently has 15 TOAs, and White Rock has none, but there is some on the way. Another great reason why you want to follow this channel, because if you did, you would already know about that. So make sure you subscribe. TOAs are about mid-rise and higher density development near rapid transit. SSMUH is about 3 to 6 units on traditional residential lots. Different tools, different scales, and here's something important. Properties inside TOAs are exempt from the small scale multi-unit housing minimum unit rules because TOA regulations override them with much higher density requirements. So they operate differently. And then there's a big one that gets missed constantly. Covenants on the titles of properties, they also still matter. Bill 44 does not override restrictive covenants registered on title. If your property has a covenant limiting the density or number of units, that covenant still applies. I've seen projects completely stopped because this wasn't checked. So before assuming that you can add a garden suite, you have to look at zoning, lot size, transit proximity, servicing capacity, overlays, and the title covenants. Every property has to be evaluated individually. And if you're thinking about buying because you want to add a garden suite, don't assume potential. I've seen buyers purchase properties thinking, I'll just add a garden suite later on, only to find out that the rear yard is too shallow, or the house sits too deep, or there's a covenant on the title, or servicing upgrades make the project financially unrealistic, and at that point it's way too late. If garden suite potential is part of your buying criteria, that evaluation needs to happen before you remove subjects, not after you take possession. Now let's talk about where most projects fall apart, because what works on paper doesn't always work in real life. Rear yard depth matters more than total lot size. You need room for rear setbacks, side setbacks, and minimum separation from the main house. In White Rock, for example, a garden suite must be at least 3 meters from the primary home. If the existing house sits too deep on the lot, the project dies right there. Homes closer to the front of the lot typically are going to work best. Centered homes on the lot usually struggle more. Lot width also matters as well. Narrow lots create tighter design constraints, parking challenges, and privacy issues. Wider lots give architects more flexibility. And in areas like White Rock, slope is another major factor. Sloped lots can mean things like retaining walls, drainage engineering, and higher foundation costs. It doesn't mean that it can't be done, but it absolutely changes the budget. And then there's servicing, which is where the budget quietly shifts. Water and sewer capacity matter. Older homes may need upgrades. Electrical is a big one. Many older properties are still 100 or 125 amp service, and adding a garden suite often triggers a 200 amp upgrade. Stormwater can require new drainage systems or infiltration upgrades, and these aren't exciting parts of the project, but they're real. And this is where the it should be simple turns into this is way more complex than I ever thought it was going to be. So before getting excited about how many units are allowed, the real question is, does the physical site and its servicing actually support this? Not only does all that complicate things, but now we need to actually consider what this might cost. But before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit about if you're planning on buying a home this year. There's actually free money available. We're talking about municipal, provincial, and federal incentives, whether you're buying, renovating, or just trying to tap into programs that most people don't even know exist. We've pulled together everything we could find, links, quick summaries, and key details all in one place so you can make sure that you're not leaving any money on the table. You'll find the link to download that in the description below of this video. It's totally free, super easy to use, and worth checking out. All right, let's get back to the video. Now, let's talk money. When people think about building a garden suite, they focus on construction costs, but the real question is total project costs: design, engineering, permits, utility upgrades, site work, drainage, electrical upgrades, landscaping restoration, sometimes even demolition. Those things can add up quickly. Then you need to ask, what's the realistic rental income? What's the payback period? Is this a 5-year play, or is this a 15 to 20-year hold? In today's environment, garden suites usually makes sense as long-term holds, lifestyle flexibility plays, family housing solutions maybe, or future optionality. They are rarely quick ROI projects. If your goal is maximum density and maximizing land value, redevelopment often wins financially. But if your goal is flexibility, multi-generational living, steady rental income, and a long-term appreciation of your property, a garden suite can still make a lot of sense.
That's why I say this all the time. A garden suite is rarely a pure math decision. It's usually a lifestyle plus income decision. Here's a simple way I evaluate them. They tend to work well when you have a deep rear yard. The house sits closer to the front and the site is relatively flat and services are modern and you're planning to hold long term. They struggle when the yard is shallow, the house is centered, the site is steep, major utility upgrades are required, or the goal is purely highest and best financial use. Again, it's not what's about technically allowed, it's about what makes sense.
There's one more misconception that I still need to clear up for you. Small-scale multi-unit housing does not legalize unauthorized suites in existing properties. You cannot take a property with one primary residence and 2 illegal basement suites and assume that Bill 44 makes that compliant. It doesn't. Any additional units must still meet BC Building Code regulations and municipal requirements. If a suite was built without permits, it still needs to be brought into compliance, or it could be asked to be decommissioned by the municipality. The legislation increases unit allowances, but it does not override the BC Building Code. Unit allowance and legal compliance are not the same thing. It's about what's feasible and, more importantly, what's right for your property and for your goals. That said, if you're evaluating a property with existing suites or thinking of adding one, you need to confirm that they're properly permitted and compliant. I've done a separate video specifically on unauthorized suites and the changes that brought or came forward through Bill 44 and the misconceptions that it's given to those with unauthorized basement suites. It's a must watch because that's a whole conversation on its own. And the good news is, if you're interested, that video is coming up right now. Just because your neighbor has 3 basement suites doesn't mean you can too. And yet that's exactly what a lot of people in BC now believe. In this video, I'm breaking down what's actually allowed when it comes to multiple suites on one property and why one bad assumption could cost you your financing, your insurance, or even your home sale.